Salvadoran immigrant was convicted in the killing of D.C. intern Chandra Levy 9 years ago. He will be sentenced next month. We're back with our panel. Guys, even the prosecutor said there wasn't a whole lot of evidence here, Jennifer.
Yeah, this case hinged on a jailhouse snitch, which is notoriously unreliable evidence, as well as what we call other crimes evidence. Evidence that he did acts that were similar to this killing. In my opinion, that carries little weight because the other...
It's a controversial area of law, right?
It is, because usually it's very prejudicial, has a very prejudicial effect, and it outweighs any probative value. The prior crimes that he allegedly did were assaulting women in this park. But usually... But
it's very similar. A judge in deciding, if a prosecutor, I'm the DA in the case, and I brought a lot of this type of evidence in, I find it very helpful.
Of course.
You know, so you bring it in front of the judge and you say, look, he committed these other offenses, and you show they're not too remote in time, and yes, they do a balancing act with the prejudicial and the probative value, but if it's a similar MO, guys, where he's doing the same type of thing, women in the park, you know, coming up to them, committing assaults against them, that's very persuasive that, in fact, a similar pattern was used in this case, and he's the guy responsible.
Kim, it's remarkable that in today's day and age, without DNA, without the forensics, without all the science, they were able to secure a conviction. But what this case really speaks about is the modern day investigators maybe are too reliant on such forensics, because this case could have and should have been solved 8 years ago when it first broke, and they just failed to connect the dots.
They interviewed him.
All right, Tom, real quick.
Well, just, you know, going back to the evidentiary issues, I mean, it's a hallmark of our city. In fact, it's statutory in the federal rules of evidence that propensity should not be used to prove guilt. Now, there's certain exceptions. You were getting at common scheme or plan.
Right.
But there's no allegations he ever murdered anyone. He robbed other people and so forth. The snitch that we're talking about was a fellow member of the MS-13 street gang, which is one of the most notorious Salvadorian street gangs in the United States. So some serious credibility problems there.
Yeah, this guy was
you have no
uphill battle, illegal immigrant.
No DNA evidence. You know, someone referred to this as a miracle that they were able to get a...
Well, I think they got the right guy. You know, I mean, the jury went before a jury. He had his day in court.
They never get it wrong, do they?
Well, not my jury. Well, he committed possibly hundreds of burglaries, and it took police a few years to catch him. It's a really interesting story. They finally caught up to the barefoot bandit. Remember this guy? Colton Harris Moore is being held in solitary confinement in a detention center outside of Seattle until his trial begins in July. This story, I mean, people couldn't get enough of it.
This is unreal. How do you steal planes? I just don't understand it. And like 5 or 6 of them, and then crash them and walk away. I mean, it really sort of underscores...
With no shoes.
Right. It underscores the deficiencies in our national security, quite honestly, that somebody can go, steal 6 planes, crash them, and do it over and over again.
And have a massive Facebook following. Do you remember this? Everyone was like cheering him on.
60,000 friends on Facebook. I mean, he became a cult phenomenon.
But in a lot of ways, you know, that's what really makes this a sad case, because by all accounts, Colton Harris had a horrific childhood. His father was a drug user, an alcoholic, physically abused him. His mother, by his account, was a drinker. He left home to live in the wild at 7 years old. And in fact, he started committing his first burglaries to survive. He would steal food and blankets and so forth. This kid was brilliant enough to teach himself how to fly airplanes internationally by using...
trouble with the landing. Fasten your seatbelt.
Hey, you know what? I didn't even get that far. And he learned that by reading flight manuals and working on a computer flight simulator game. I mean, it's a very interesting story. It's also probably the only non-grotesque story that we've covered here tonight.
Yes.
So you could feel a little good about it.
Hopefully they reached an agreement where he can actually have a life. I mean, he could theoretically face the rest of his life in jail, given the expansiveness of his crime.
Is this a case where some kind of leniency perhaps is warranted, or rehabilitation?
Exactly. He's young. He's a lot of talent.
Absolutely.
I mean, he only got 3 months in the Bahamas.
So we kind of agree on that one. It's the Bahamas, man. They're like, hey, umbrella in your drink, bye. All right, a grisly discovery on a beach in New York, and police have very little to go on.